fantastic opportunity to be here. I'm very, very proud. I'm very happy to open this session, this part of the session. This is a movement that has started, as you know, COP26, where we launched the Global Innovation Hub initiative, and since then, much things has happened. We are very proud that we had quite a good results at COP26, and we wanted to start just to give you a flavor of what were the outcomes of last year pavilion and the sessions that we have at COP26 in Glasgow in November. So very happy to see all faces, and then I know that you have a long trip to get here, so you're most welcome, and then we will kick off with some pictures, a show of pictures that reflects in a nutshell what has been the activities at the pavilion at COP26. Thank you, my colleagues. Please run the video. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you be part of this movement. And so we are very, very inspired by the efforts that you made to be part of the community, UGIH friends. And without further ado, and after this soft opening to welcome you all, I'd like to give the floor to Masamba Choye. Masamba is a project executive of the Global Innovation Hub. Masamba, welcome.
Thank you, Carlos, and again, good morning to all of you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those that are following us virtually. I'm really very pleased to welcome all of you, friends, member of this very important movement. So when we decided to launch this initiative, it was in a very specific context. We realized that innovation is not all the time used to serve people and sustainability. Innovation is most of the time currently used to serve power, military power and economic power. It was very important for us to explore how we can create a broad movement, innovation ecosystem that will support enhanced use of innovation to support people and their planet. And we wanted also to explore how this can be done in the most effective manner. So we started this journey, and then there was key partners that started this with us, Climate-KIC. We had also MIRISE, Mission Innovation. We had Open Earth Foundation. We had GICOM, and many other organizations that started this journey with us, including cities like Goyang City and British Columbia. We started together this initiative. What is really important is that after 1 year, we were able to grow the movement and then to establish bridge between this network and many other networks. And this was really a huge achievement. So now we can say we are working with YK Center, I see them here. We are working with UN SDSN. We are working with IRP and many other very important organizations, KPMG and so and so. And this is really important for us because learning as an organization is critical, and societal learning particularly is important. What I mean by societal learning is the mutually beneficial outcome that is getting out of radical collaboration. Radical collaboration between entities that are not used to work together, and radical collaboration following new pattern of working together. And this has been extremely important for us, and we are looking forward to continue in that direction and further grow this movement. So other achievements that have been made include book. The cookbook, which is how do we engage with cities and how do we better understand what are their needs in terms of solution, climate and sustainability solution, and how we can best support them. And our focus on subnational is related to the fact that these are entities that are very close to people, and we want innovation to serve people. So we have also achieved some other very important milestones. So for example, we have finalized a new financial framework that is integrating green bond and carbon market. So we have developed a proof of concept that will be presented here on Wednesday and also during the solution day on the 17th, which is a major achievement. So we have also started work on the digital platform of the Global Innovation Hub and work on the taxonomy around this digital platform. You will see also a presentation on that during these 2 weeks. Finally, we have also been involved with the European Commission on developing a framework to measure the climate contribution of an enabling entity, which is also something very important because so far the focus has been on problem and problem owner, how measure emitters can reduce their emission. We did not focus enough on solution provider, those that can enable the entity emitting to reduce their emission. So we are now very interested in that, and we are exploring how we can put in place a framework that can support them in reducing their emission. So, but we have a lot of things that are left that need to be done, and we expect this COP27 dialogue to be really the beginning of a process that will allow us to continue to grow the network, a process that will allow us to start being impactful on the ground, and the process that will allow us also to get an enhanced understanding of how innovation can best serve people and the planet. I'll stop there and then hand over to our other partner.
Thank you very much, Masamba, and thank you for this inspiring and very important introduction. And thank you for your leadership ambition that has taken to this point where we are at COP with this pavilion and with a very rich program. We are covering a number of themes during the first week. You probably saw the program, the full program already uploaded into our website. And in the second week, we will have also rich dialogues on the climate solutions and the demands, particularly focusing on the core human needs. So you are most welcome also to look into our visual assets. We have a social media package, and during these 2 weeks, we will be taking full advantage of that and help you also to disseminate your progress and your engagements with the Global Innovation Hub. So we finished this first part of the session. I'd like to now invite our friend and also one of the first partners that came on board in the Global Innovation Hub to take on the second part of the session today. He's Jorn Verbeeck, and he's affiliated with the KPMG, and he will be our moderator for the next session. Jorn, you're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm happy with those words, especially for welcoming me as a friend. And I think if I look around, there's many familiar faces. And I think those of you who don't know each other will get to know one another. We launched indeed the concepts in Glasgow, and ever since we did really a lot of work. I think it was also one of the things I took home from Glasgow last year is how do we create meaningful connections? Not just to stand in line waiting for a coffee and handing over cards, but to really think like, what is the topic we master today and where do we need to go? And when do we go across that comfort zone where we say, this is what we already know, what we can achieve. If we want to achieve that radical collaboration, where do we find one another? What's the language we use? What's the agenda? What's the cultural dimensions we bring? How do we connect all of those elements? And I think, therefore, that the idea of friendship and family is really important. To really know that when it's sometimes early in the morning or late in the evening, you want to jump on a call because you want to push that dial. And I think, therefore, I'm happy to also invite some partners of the first hour to the next panel. So looking forward to have Kirsten come over here in front, Andy, Martin, and then also Dennis there, Dennis on the side. Come and join us here. And while you're joining us, very sincerely, also a huge thanks to Masamba, Carlos, Sylvia, Pana, for making this all possible, for creating that space, for creating those connections and friendship, and inviting us into that Innovation Hub family. And of course, we hope to see the family grow now here in Egypt, but also in the next couple of years to come. If I can ask all panelists to just move your chair a little bit, because it's now, you're nicely aligned, which is good, but try to make it a bit more horseshoe shaped so that there's more of a cozy feeling. And as I was almost forgetting, happy to introduce you, of course, slightly officially. So welcome to Andy Deacon, who's co-managing director at the Global Covenant of Mayors, Kirsten Dunlop, CEO of EAERE Climate-KIC, Dennis Pamlin, here on behalf of Mission Innovation and RISE, and then also Martin Wainstein, he's ED of Open Earth Foundation. I almost forgot, because I got to know them, as persons, as I think I can call them friends by now, but happy to, in that larger idea of family and friendship, to just take a step back, because some people are still new to the hub. Like, why the Global Innovation Hub? Why is this really something that can be a differentiator? We have lots of pavilions here, and we're not going to say that this is the best or the most innovative pavilion, but why this idea of an innovation hub? What can we contribute? What can you contribute as an organization, as a person, to really let this grow, let this flourish, and become bigger than it is today? Who wants to start? I see everyone looking at Kirsten, so Kirsten, happy to pass the mic to you.
Thank you very much, Jorn. So I think a few things, and I think this is a dialogue about which all of us feel very passionate. First of all, I think in the context of where we are now, the role of innovation, what we mean by... Let me start again. Oh, okay, right. So I think why is the Innovation Hub, the Global Innovation Hub, so important? We're in a context in which it really is irrelevant, or at least less relevant now, to talk about the fact that we need transformative change. Dennis and I were discussing that this morning. The challenge now is how. And how, with what means, with what purpose, with what framing, with what scope, with what actors, and with what combination of effects on every single possible intervention point. And at that point, what opens up for me very importantly is in the one place where we have a sense of global, an attempt to pull ourselves together multilaterally, to cooperate, to make decisions, to concur at a planetary scale, at least the minimum thresholds and the maximum thresholds that we need to work with as communities, as societies, as countries. This is a place where that activity and practice of how to translate commitments into action needs to be embedded. So the importance of having an innovation hub linked to the UN process, in fact embedded in the core of the UN process, becomes imperative, really an imperative at this point. Then what secondly I think is extremely important about this particular initiative and its framing is not just the fact that it is in principle about the notion of moving from commitments to action and the role of innovation to help us do that, but two things about that. The fact that innovation names the need to learn and discover and test and experience. We simply do not know how to achieve what we need to achieve at the scale and at the speed. So we need a practice for getting our hands dirty as quickly as possible with each other in every single possible intervention point. And that's what we're using the word innovation to name. Not the service of technology to support commercialization factors, to run capital markets, and perhaps one day come around and transform our ways of living, but a practice of concerted exploration, experience, discovery, and understanding how to become different. And the second, I think, is really around the question that Masamba named at the very beginning, which is this is not individual fragmented dispersed efforts to come up with some invention that might substitute a tiny bit of the problem. This is about redesigning human life, human ways of living, human attitudes to each other, human dependencies. And in that sense, we are using innovation to name a global practice of systemic transformation of ourselves. And that is why in this particular process, naming and putting innovation at the heart of the UN process, creating a place and a space for collaborative, collective discovery, learning, testing our assumptions, getting uncomfortable, is incredibly important. And it's why partners like us are here.
I'm going to come back to you, Kirsten, later on. Make it a bit more tangible. Let me challenge you also to see where you see pockets of the future. But let me first go to Andy. Well, I saw all of you nodding. Andy, what is the Global Covenant of Mayors bringing? And if you already take that call to action from Kirsten into account, the how do you do that? What are you bringing and how?
So good morning everyone and welcome. Nice to see everybody so energized on the first day. Let's see how we're doing in our panel on the 18th, right at the very end, where we come back to this very pavilion to talk again about cities as solution providers. And I think that's one dimension that as the Global Covenant of Mayors that we can bring. So we're now 12,500 cities strong. And each of those cities has made a commitment to go at least as far as their national government in their emissions reduction commitments through their NDCs. but 3/4 of Global Covenant cities have made a commitment to go beyond that national level of commitment. But as several speakers have identified, it's then about delivery and how are we going to do that. And one of the dimensions that we want to bring is both cities as test beds and the ability to innovate faster than many national governments can. But also, and you've heard it from Masamba, Carlos and others, cities as solution providers, as well as those who are being seen as markets for commercial product providers and for debt-based finance and kind of solutions that don't necessarily fit with a Paris Agreement aligned set of targets. So being part of a community like this gives our mayors the opportunity to experiment and to be bold. And really working with so many partners from across a broad spectrum allows us both to test and demonstrate solutions, but then for leading cities to be able to share those with others. And we see that as an important role for the Global Covenant here. We're helping to chair and lead the cities group as part of the Global Innovation Hub, and look forward to expanding that community of practice. But I guess then in terms of where we stand right now, having launched a year ago and now being here, Masamba mentioned mission innovation, and we're also part of that, having launched an urban transitions mission during the course of 2022 that will work with a group of 50 leading cities from across the globe, and announcements coming on that next week. But it's really about the ability to experiment and with those cities and to assist those leaders in really thinking differently, in adopting this human needs-based approach, and in feeling emboldened to kind of lead the way and to take things forward. So it's very easy to sit here and say that at the start of 2 weeks. Let's see how we've done at the end.
We might see you back, Andy, I think on the last day, so I'll keep that question in mind. Talking about mission innovation, happy to pass to Dennis. Dennis, I just don't want to put you in the box because I know you hate that of just mission innovation. So you can speak on behalf of RISE Mission Innovation, yourself, the hub, about this how. Like, ever since Glasgow, it's been on the table. Where do you see that we actually made progress, and how is mission innovation contributing to that?
I think just first taking a step back, because I think it's sometimes a bit of a difficulty when you talk about innovation, because everybody talks about innovation. And initially what we talked about was an expanded innovation agenda, because we have lots on innovation, on claiming to be net zero by buying offset and being creative accountant, etc. So, but not really delivering what is needed for people. So what we said that the expanded innovation agenda is moving away from focus on sectors to human needs, and not addressing people as sources of emissions only, but also delivering of solutions. So that sort of quarter up here, who are the solution providers addressing human needs? That's the core. But the concrete thing is usually stepwise, because many stakeholders today are very stuck in reducing emissions to zero. Regardless if that is sustainable, regardless if that is globally sustainable, regardless if that is really bringing people on board or creating tensions. So we have a bit of a challenge then that for 30 years, the climate discussions has been innovating to get to carbon zero or claiming carbon net zero. So that's the first thing. So what we are now doing, I think, is two parts. One is finding solution providers. Who are the ones that actually come up with solutions that are globally sustainable? We talk about an 11 billion filter. 11 billion people must be able to live flourishing lives. If we are providing zero carbon emission solutions that is only possible for use for a few people on the planet, that's not an option. The second one is ideas and structures. How do you move from what we call a static problem approach, looking at the world today and try to get it to zero, to a dynamic solution approach, where you look for tomorrow? I usually take the examples that the way we think today in climate is the way we thought 30 years ago. big companies was not acknowledging climate change. And what we tried to do was to get some transparency, to get them to show that they could get some emission reductions that were cost efficient. That is what we're still doing today. But internet did not exist 30 years ago. Neither did Tesla, Amazon, Google, Uber, Spotify. But now we're asking current companies to reduce the emissions to zero. So a litmus test for how we focus is how much do we spend on startups and incubators. And that is for me a test for cities, governments, companies, etc. How much are we looking for tomorrow? Not that all solutions will be there, but today most climate strategies by cities, governments do not even include startups. So that is a little bit on how far we are from a sustainable agenda, but we're getting there, and we're getting there fast, because it's a joyful and happy thing, because now it's not about blaming people for reducing emissions. Now it's about encouraging people delivering solutions. So that's why I think this Global Innovation Hub, it's such a positive new contribution to the global climate discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Martin, moving to you. Dennis already mentioned transparency. I think if you look at the scope and scale of things, we will need a lot of data, a lot of insights. How do you fit in as the Open Earth Foundation?
Thank you. Open Earth works on big picture, open source, digital public infrastructure for our macro environmental challenges. The first thing that I think we bring, and for us to remind, is context. Just 2 weeks ago, UNEP, a GAP report, shares to us that we have a very slim chance to meet 1.5 degrees. So we are in a context where if we don't do things that specifically radically change in the next years, we are failing this generation and future generations. Now, we're also in the context of the implementation COP. To me, that translates to millions of projects of mitigation and adaptation around the world. It also translates to trillions of dollars in capital that need to be deployed every year for the next decades. Now, if those millions of projects and trillions of dollars are deployed in a way that creates incremental change rather than exponential, we failed. If we're able to do it in a way that creates only a climate solution but not solution for humans and their core human needs, we also fail. And if we do it in a way that works great for the North but not so much for the Global South, we also fail. So those are just 3 challenges that we have to get right, and we don't have margin of error. Now, to do that, there's a lot of intelligence that has to come in to make all of this work. How we reshape cities, how we deploy capital in a constantly learning approach as we go, because we can't deploy something expecting that it's going to work for the next 10 years or 20 years. It's going to constantly have to learn. This is where the role of digital technology and our insights come together. As a core part of the UN Global Innovation Hub is the virtual hub. How do we, as a family now, bringing together between different partners, elevate the role of UN in UN climate change, expanding innovation, but also bringing the role of cutting edge technology to bring all the pieces of that puzzle that need to come together. In the digital space, creating 3-sided marketplaces are actually extremely hard. But that's kind of the big challenge, because we've got the demand from cities and actors that have core human needs, the solution providers, but also finance and policy. It's very hard for any entity that is not the United Nations to be able to do it. But as part of UN climate change, this is now possible. And being able to work on this in an open digital fashion, through open source, through open data, through open models that help us constantly learn about evolving cities, what our goal is, what the core human needs change over time, how those projects that are being deployed through project finance instruments are actually achieving, what are ways in which capital flows in a smart approach. This is something that is quite historic to be part of putting this into the table as as being ushered through UN, and one of our tasks is to help as part of stewarding that, hopefully over the next particularly year, because again, the clock is ticking, so we have to deliver on our promise and put out a tool that really helps us get there.
Thank you, Martin. This is the very first session of hopefully 2 intensive weeks. You're all partners to the hub. You've been talking a lot about core human needs. What does it actually mean? Like, what do we want to discuss the next 2 weeks? For each and every one of you, we have 5 minutes left. Which core human needs are you going to tackle? What do you expect? And what's the call to the audience? Because we all know one another. We need to have more people, more partners aboard. So which core human needs you feel this makes it really tangible, our story? What is our call to action?
It's hard to pinpoint one, right? Because I think it's the same thing if we solve for nutrition but not clothing, or not for shelter, we're in the same problem. I think that we've got the opportunity through looking at the lens of cities, because I know that's going to be a big focus of this week, is to think about rethinking value chains that address a lot of them altogether. It's those win-win models that we really have to be looking at. It's re-evaluating the materials that we use for all of these core human needs. It's looking at the whole story from cradle to grave of all of those needs, and also the transparency and data knowledge between all the actors that are part of those value chains, so that we can have a very good X-ray of those solutions.
Thanks, Martin. It's always good to challenge the moderator to say it's not one core human need, so keep doing that.
Well, I echo that. We really focus on flourishing lives that needs to go beyond single ones, because that's also where the most innovation happens, when you start saying, how does that city being built? How is that building being built? Where you integrate the nutrition, the living, the exploration, etc. And that's where we are really happy also to launch 2 collaborations, one with ICLEI and one with OCD, on how you actually do that in practice. How do you challenge people to move from improving transportation to ask what is the access to what human needs are required? And then you can't separate it. Because the current transport system, if you want to challenge that, you need to say you need access to education, access to nutrition, access to X, Y, Z. So you really need to have that holistic perspective. So that's really, really important. But I think also coming back to you, what we really want also, and what we're going to launch the last day, is a tool to help people to find, how do you measure that? How do that become measurable? Because if we just talk about this as a vague term, it doesn't help very much. So how can we help everyone from investors to startup companies, to large companies, to cities, to measure their progress from a human needs-driven perspective? And that's really what we hope, that this will be the shift. Last year we talked about this as theoretical concepts. Now it's practical tools and measurable outcomes that is on the table.
Thank you, Dennis. Kirsten.
So let me build on that with a couple of elements, because and this is a build. These are not alternatives. I think we are in a context of crisis, speaking as an organization in the north part of the world where crisis is literally now measuring out in front of us. The irony between having hundreds of solutions and simply not being able to join them up to actually end up with affordable energy and to avert a food crisis coming down the track. So I think where this is a space, and in these 2 weeks, one of the things that we really need to keep enacting and work through and form alliances around is ground truthing. Masamba talked about the importance of focusing here on a subnational level. It is cities. It's cities and regions, because that is where the shit hits the fan, excuse my language. But it's really where you notice this is where water is running out. This is where food supply chains are not working. This is where the question of reimagining self can be made. So my addition on this would be stories of the future we need. In this COP for the first time, and here, you will hear next week, an explicit call to the creative industries, to culture, to art, to come to start to reconfigure our imagination of self. Because our core need is that we need to reconceive of ourselves. That helps us then mobilize around connecting and joining dots. And maybe one other element is really on the importance of bringing in and anticipating the relationship between this discussion and biodiversity environment. How do we get to regenerative logics where we teach ourselves to think about human needs with the lessons from natural systems, from ecosystem services, so that we redesign cities and places as the places where we enact relationships of abundance, of generosity, and of kind of giving back and giving to each other.
Andy, to you for the last words. And you put the challenge on the table yourself. Where do we want to be in 2 weeks?
Yes, in 2 weeks' time. I would like that framework to be in place, to be working across multiple of those human needs, but to have identified a growing group of both local leaders and others who want to work with them to stand ready to implement those solutions. I mentioned already the urban implementation cookbook. And I do think that's something we need to come back to. You talked about cities being closest to the people, and really by engaging in that way, and I know from previous discussions with Kirsten and others on the Global Innovation Hub, context is so important. You drew that distinction between solutions that are appropriate for Global North and Global South, but I think it goes even beyond that. The Global Covenant is engaged in projects, for example, on socially subsidized water provision in Senegal, and looking to help the water network to adapt to kind of future water shortages. And you'll hear many other examples from city leaders and mayors over the next few weeks around how they are dealing with impending crises, looking ahead, and trying to implement those solutions from a local leadership perspective. Because when the stuff does hit the fan next time around, it's those local leaders who are going to be called on to stand up in front of their populations and give answers as to what they did or didn't do and how they were or weren't prepared. During these 2 weeks, we can help them to be more ready.
Can I jump into the opportunity space that's there? I think there's one thing that none of us has mentioned, but I know all of us care deeply about, and Masamba started with this, and that is the question of collaboration. This is a space for radical collaboration. One of the call to action that I would really want to put on behalf of all of us, we name it. It stays theoretical. You watch the massive dispersion of effort that is here. Hundreds of well-intentioned people out there trying to do something, and we are not finding a way to make it a collaborative that genuinely integrates and builds and gets to exponential outcomes. So I think this is a space where we need to work out and test and design and model how to do that, so that the whole is so much greater than the sum of the parts.
Thank you, Kirsten. And thanks to the first panel. Give a warm round of applause. And just for all of you, it's like a huge chaotic space. This is your home. For the next 2 weeks, you just come here every now and then. You talk to people. You build on Kirsten's call. You collaborate. But you come home here. And after 2 weeks, you come back to me and say, this is what I took out, but also this is what I'm going to do in the months to come. So welcome to the Innovation Hub, all of you.